How you doing?
How am I doing? How am I doing?
Hmm.
I'm okay.
Welcome to the High Contrast Podcast. I'm Eric.
Hi, I'm Will.
And we're here to talk about a lot of things.
Uh-huh.
Movies have been better than worse at the beginning of this year. And
Good.
one of those that I saw that I was like weirdly surprised by was Mean Girls,
Mean
which
Girls.
which kicked off this trend that has been in Mean Girls, this movie called Miller's Girl, where Martin Freeman and Jenna Ortega play like Martin Freeman is a teacher and she's into him, and there's like crossing lines,
Okay, yeah.
and Lisa Frankenstein, which just came out, where a girl falls in love with a corpse, and all of them are like weirdly horny teenage girl movies, and all of them
Mhm.
are weirdly good.
Yeah, so you said Mean Girls.
Yeah,
Um, was it good?
yeah. I mean, there are some people who the flaws that I know are there, they take such issue with that they think the overall thing is a waste of time. But I thought it was kind of fantastic. I thought arguably some of the things that are iconic about the original have like more of a definitive sort of smack to them in this movie.
Really? I will say I have not seen Mean Girls 2024. Mean Girls
4.
2002, 3, 4? 4.
You
Okay.
were right.
20 years. Great. Love it. That's one of my favorite movies ever. It's one of the best written comedies I've ever seen. So that's like a high bar for me. But as
It
you said, like you said that everybody else I've talked to has said the same thing. Like
really.
it's really good.
Yeah.
So I got to see it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go into it assuming that it's trying to give you like it's bizarre because you can really tell it's still from Tina Fey, and it's
Okay.
still it's not like it's trying to there's like a little bit of, oh, let's make it for a modern audience, so we're going to do like social media montages of how someone is
Hmm.
affected socially,
Okay.
but not to like smack you over the head or try and make the characters use slang for Gen Z or anything like that. It's
It's not a
there.
Diablo Cody movie.
Yeah, like I know there was one criticism that the burn book didn't make any sense in the modern day because all that stuff would have been like a shared chat room kind of thread, like kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean that's more typical, but people still scrapbook and that's effectively what it is.
That's the thing for me. It's like it still works, I think, and there's still it's like weirdly private and tangible. So if someone
Yeah, and
wanted to have something,
that could be why because today's youth would be more top of mind. If I put it online, somebody's going to find it. The big fundamental difference is this is a musical, right?
yeah, 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 yeah. But it's sort of sometimes they're singing in a place where I'm like, this is a two-sentence dialogue that's turned into a song, like,
Hmm.
but not a lot. Most of the
Okay.
time it's great. Like I can't I there's a I'm not very good at like remembering and being able to sing things like that, but there are at least one or two iconic kind of memorable catchy songs. I didn't really think about this ever with the original. I didn't really get this weird feeling in my spine like I did watching this new one, and I'm not so sure it's a good thing. Where this movie I think is supposed to celebrate like the difficulties of adolescence and like coming of age in a certain way, but it has its own like sense of humor. But
Yeah.
there's this unshakable sort of feeling of these girls aren't the ones who created the rules of what it means to be popular or like successful. Like they
Hmm.
wear makeup products, they wear fashion products, they fit a certain idea of who's good and who's bad. And I'm just gonna put it bluntly because I don't know how to like skirt around this, but it's like
Good pun.
created by men.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's very weird getting the sense that they're all like fighting with each other. I'm better than you, I'm better than you, and they feel like they're being made to fight for the enjoyment of like some 40-year-old man. And it kind of came from the more sexualized parts of the movie and whatnot, and me thinking like, who is this for? Is it supposed to be for teenagers who are celebrating that they are growing into their sexuality? Because this is also heavily trying to pay to the audience who like the 2004 one, who are all in their 30s and 40s now. So who are you trying to entertain
Thanks for
with
the
this
reminder.
like I'm so sexy and I'm a teenager thing? Like, you know, and
So
it keeps going beyond that to where it's like it's really weird that like Regina George is cheating on this one guy, and they're kind of using like men
Aaron
who are
Samuels,
all kind of they're all kind of empty vessels in the new movie. They're not like
the men are, you're
uh
saying?
yeah, they're just not that like I don't need them to be at all. But the fact that the way that like men are sort of absent kind of makes it
So
feel like they're hidden, and it just gives me this like weird feeling like the movie can be what it is. Like it's I don't think it really needs anything, but it's really weird watching one person be like, I'm better than you because I'm thinner or taller or whatever, and it's like, yeah, but you only think you're better because someone convinced you that that's better, and that person is just sitting back while y'all fight each other, and just
yeah.
it's
Well,
weird.
I've got a lot of thoughts about that, and not to get too philosophical, but within the scope of a system that we live in, I think that what's empowering to any person, be it a teenage girl or somebody who's a man who's approaching 40 like myself, is whatever they want to do. And sometimes it exists within the confines of that system, and it is appealing to men, and sometimes it's not. It exists outside that system. But ultimately, it's up to the person, whoever it is, to determine for themselves what they consider to be empowering. And I think that, yes, I agree that we do exist within that system where, yeah, they are competing for attention from men, and maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's, the um, sort of flipping things on its head that the men are empty vessels and basically absent and meaningless because women are often treated that way in other movies. So, for example, the
Well,
Ghostbusters
I should say
2016.
I should say empty, like yes, in the one sense, like in Barbie we talked about like the men are kind of put in the seat that the women usually are, but this is not like, you know, the guy still is with Regina and she still cheats, you
Mhm.
know, but it's just sort of something for some reason happened in this version of the movie where I'm like, who is that guy and why don't we know anything more about him? And who is this other character who is leading on Gretchen Wieners? And like, why don't we see more of like he's making these decisions, and those decisions are like using and stringing along these women,
Mm,
and they're just in the background.
I
You
see.
know, it's weird. But anyways,
Yeah, that's not quite what I was thinking. Again, I haven't seen it, so I can't really comment on it. But something else I would recommend if you haven't seen the movie Poor Things, with Emma Stone, Mark Ruffalo, and Willem Dafoe, I think that is a much more direct criticism of a system that is like you're brought up to be appealing to men. What would happen if someone were in a situation where they were completely absent from that and sort of just dropped into the world? How would she behave?
ah,
So, have you seen it? Is
I
that why you're grinning
want
at me? Or
I want to love that movie. I want to
okay,
so
okay.
badly, but my brain won't let me because why didn't they just do Amnesia? Why didn't they just do Amnesia?
Yeah,
They could have just
yeah.
done Amnesia. Don't make her a literal baby. Just don't do
Okay,
that.
so folks, it is a bit heavy. When he says literal baby, yeah, that's pretty much what's happening. So I I get what you're saying.
And she did
I
an
guess they thought
amazing job of developing from child to adult, like playing those stages of development. She
while
did an amazing
maintaining
job.
one appearance as an adult one.
Yes, yes.
That's literally what happens, by the way. A
But
baby's
yeah,
brain is put into grown Emma Stone's head,
yes.
and that's how there is no context for her. She just behaves the way she would behave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's okay, folks. See it if you want to. Eric appears to really want to like that movie.
There's so much to appreciate about it. It's gorgeous, it's wild, it's imaginative. It does a much more,
go ahead.
like you said, thoughtful breakdown of like, if you take away the context that's socially ingrained in us from the beginning of sexuality and all these things, what would at least one person do? And they do that, and it's like they've been sexualized, so they're interested in sexuality, but then demonized when they try and get interested in that. And like it's a very like twist. It's a very, very thoughtful. It's very good.
Is it Mark Ruffalo's accent? Is that why you don't like that movie?
That's 100% it. I was trying not to say it
Because he's doing a Dick Van Dyke thing. It is better than Dick Van Dyke in, was that Mary Poppins or Bedknobs and Broomsticks? Something that came out even before my time. Where he's like, "Hello, governor," and it's bad. Remind me to talk about Deadpool and Wolverine in a second.
That's the next one I was going to bring up, because
Okay.
There's also Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which I'm kind of interested in, but I still have to watch the trailer. There was a release of like a few things, and then there's news that the success of Alan Wake 2 seems to be pushing forward a sequel to Control and remakes of the Max Payne games.
Don't do this to me. Don't give me hope. Dude,
So,
I was thinking of a trailer for Control 2 that like you don't know it's Control until Jesse shows up and says something like, "This case is now under the jurisdiction of the Federal Bureau of Control." I would be thrilled if I saw that. And then Alan Wake 2, unfortunately, I have some bad news for you, Eric, that James McCaffrey, the voice of Alex Casey in Control and Alan Wake 2, and the voice of Max Payne, died in 2023. So,
oh my gosh,
they're going to have to find a new voice for Alex Casey / Max Payne. It's really sad because he was. So that's one thing about Alan Wake 2. He was phenomenal in that game. He was so good. A great swan song for him. But yeah, I mean, I would play it. And I looked in my Steam library. Apparently, I own Max Payne 1 and 2 and just haven't played them. So I'm going to have to play those. But yeah, so like there's kind of teasers to Max Payne 4 in a way, because the dark place for Alan is a seedy New York full of alleys and steam, and Alex Casey, who is Max Payne, keeps showing up. So yeah, if they made a new one, I'd absolutely be on board. Cool. And you want to talk about
for now,
pretense?
They're just talking remakes, so
right. Oh, remakes. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna audition to be. Hey, Sam Lake, Mr. Lake, if you're watching, I would absolutely love to audition for the role of Max Payne / Alex Casey.
You hear that voice timbre?
Hang on. So my brother, he browses Reddit a lot. I don't really. I have a Reddit account, and he sent me from the Alan Wake subreddit somebody talking about how Alan Wake is problematic is the subject line. But then when you go into it, it's just like, this guy yells at the paparazzi all the time. And it's like a meta post of like pretending that he's real. And it went on. And this is one of my few comments on Reddit. Somebody said, yeah, and those Alex Casey fans, you know, they are all like, oh, they're such edgelords or whatever. And hang on a second. So I commented and said, clearly you've never felt the sting of regret living in a city that's heartless and cold, even in the middle of summer. Never had to make the hard choices between time with your family or scraping another victim off the pavement, telling yourself you're making a difference. Somebody made that choice for me. I don't think they can be forgiven for that. I'm not sure I can be either. And I was like, that I've played one game with Max Payne in it, and I already know exactly the kind of person he is. It's just such melodrama. And I was
I
like,
was trying to do the eyebrows.
oh,
You were.
he's in the game.
Mhm.
So Sam Lake is the face of Max Payne in 1, not 2, but then he's the face of Alex Casey and who is Max Payne. It's complicated. I'll make I made a flow chart. I'll take a picture of it and send it to you.
Okay.
But then Sam Lake is in the game at one point tied to a chair and saying like, I'm just the actor for Alex Casey. I don't know how I ended up here. Help me. And he literally says like, you don't have to go get that knife and then ritualistically kill me to move the game forward. Like, it's like, what? And then Alan's
Okay.
like, oh, that's what I have to do. But then he runs away, so you don't have to kill him. Thank goodness. Anyway, I'm so sorry. Long
That's okay.
tangent. Please,
No, it's
please, please, sequel for Control remakes of Max Payne. Please, please.
Yeah. So
I beg you, Remedy. So you mentioned we talked about how Mean Girls is a musical. Alan Wake 2 is not a musical. But
Aw.
so I talked about I played Control last time, and I said it was shaping up to be one of my favorite video games ever. I finished it. Absolutely in my top 10, maybe top 5 video games of all time. I played through Alan Wake 2, and I kind of wish we were doing an episode of Critics Critique for Alan Wake 2 because it is lauded with praise, and it doesn't really deserve all of it.
What are the review aggregators for that? Is there like IGN or Metacritic?
Well, Metacritic for sure does video games. I'd be willing to bet it's on IMDb. So it's a 90. It's an 89 on Metacritic. And I think that's close to fair. I would put it more like 85 to 80. Like
Okay.
visually incredible, very mind-bending story, and lots of interesting, unique things happening. The combat is trash. It is bad.
Okay.
And every other game from this
That was your issue with
developer.
the first one.
Well, okay. So no, the combat was unvaried in Alan Wake 1.
Oh, okay.
You were doing the same thing over and over again. And I believe Remedy, the developer, in an effort to sort of make the combat less of a slog and kind of fresher, they changed it up. And there's kind of new enemy types that do different things, but they did it wrong. And any enemy encounter is just it's supposed to be scary, and it comes across as, oh, Jesus, I gotta fight another enemy again. So they didn't do that well. Every Remedy game has like a section where heavy rock music plays, and you go through a combat section where you're kind of overpowered, and so it's supposed to be very fun. The one in the Alan Wake 2, you're not overpowered. I died like 4 or 5 times. To me, the point has always been in those segments to be like, celebrate the gameplay for a second and don't worry about the resource management. Don't worry about all of that. Just have a good time for a second. And I don't feel like they did that. But, and the other thing is like, the reason I would knock it down to an 85 is a complicated, confusing story does not make it a good story. It just makes it complicated and confusing. The creator, Sam Lake, to me feels very much like Hideo Kojima in thinking that they are making something very interesting when really they're just making something convoluted.
Okay.
That said, the story is generally very good. All the parts that aren't about Alan Wake are very interesting because you play as 2 people. You play as a lady named Saga Anderson, who's an FBI agent investigating Alan Wake, kind of. And then you play as Alan Wake, and you can switch between them pretty much whenever you want to.
Blade.
Hey, buddy.
Oh, wait.
This is my dog, Blade. Hey, buddy.
Yes.
Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy. Hey, bud.
So,
that was Blade.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I feel like the Dune is an example of this, and this is what we're about to get into. And Dune is an example of a blockbuster that has already been made into a movie that failed historically. That a guy, it was his passion project. There were talks about Denis Villeneuve making Dune as far back as 2016, when Arrival hadn't come out yet, and then after that he made Blade Runner 2049.
Did we talk about Arrival?
We haven't, no.
Oh man, I got a lot of thoughts on that movie. Very positive generally, yeah.
I want to talk about Denis Villeneuve after we go through the numbers on the thing. But yeah, like one of the things they obviously did with Dune is cast Oscar Isaac, Javier Bardem, Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Josh Brolin, who was, you know, like,
oh, he was in everything for a while.
Yeah, like they stacked that cast so that there was someone you were going to want to see. Jason Momoa, like,
oh yeah. Stellan Skarsgård, another big name.
Yeah, well, he is to me.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, generally, people. I think
like, he was in
name.
Thor and Pirates of the Caribbean.
Those are big projects, yeah.
Yep.
So I would put him as a fairly well-known name. Okay, even his kids
all the
are
Skarsgård kids. Yeah, like yeah. And that's another one. And part of the reason why Dune was able to be greenlit as the Part 1, Part 2 project that Denis Villeneuve wanted to make was because Warner Brothers had success with It Chapters 1 and 2 with Bill Skarsgård.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't know that.
And or I think at least success with It Chapter 1, because I think this was greenlit as a project before Chapter 2 came out, which is probably
Bautista. He was in that too.
Bautista, yep. So yeah, like that. So well, let me get into this.
Let's get into it.
Critics' critique for Dune.
Dune.
So we're going to start with the cinema score. So again, the cinema score is a bunch of people came out of watching the first early showings of Dune and filled out scorecards, and based on that, this movie gave like a prediction of the legs that the movie would have and kind of what it would do financially.
Mm-hmm. Which is not necessarily a critical response, right? Like
not necessarily, but it's like an audience response, and then not critical like critics, but it's a critical interpretation of that audience response.
Yeah.
And this got an A-, which completely tracks, I think. It's actually a little bit higher than I would have expected from something that's like a sci-fi opera kind of like mega blockbuster type thing. Like, I don't know. I think
I'm actively withholding my thoughts until I hear more of those scores, just to, not because I haven't developed them, but because I'm interested to hear what other scores and responses there are.
So just to put an asterisk on this, when Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring came out, with me not having read Lord of the Rings, then I am going to not know what's coming next, and that's going to be a lot to digest for a story that's not over. I'm surprised that people are like, this was amazing. Like, it was a large block of time, a lot to invest in, a lot of information to digest.
Well, my response would have been negative. I saw it in the theater and I kind of was deflated because it didn't adhere to the books, because I was a little snot that thought you had to adhere to books. But since then, I've grown in my appreciation of those movies. So yeah, it was generally positive, but for me, as someone
you're talking about Lord of the Rings, aren't you?
Yes. Sorry.
Okay, because I snapped back to Dune. So
I see. Okay, yeah. Sorry. With Lord of the Rings, I kind of was deflated, is the best word I could use when I saw it, but over time grew in my appreciation of the movie. Dune, yes, I have read the book and I've seen this movie, 2021. I did not watch the sci-fi miniseries, which I've heard is really good, or heard of the David Lynch movie.
James McAvoy in there.
Is he in that? No way.
I think he's in some form of Dune.
Oh, I think he's in Children of Dune,
Yes. Yep.
which is the sequel, which, by the way, hey everybody, Dune gets really weird. After the first story, which is already weird, it gets really weird. And we'll talk about that. I do want to mention some spoilers as we get into it for the movie, but yeah, just we'll talk.
Little thing to add in here, little thing down in the corner to add in here. Dune
Uh-huh.
1984, Metacritic is a 41.
Hey, wow, that's low.
Yeah, surprisingly low for how bizarrely insane. Like, obviously, there are things that are wildly different between the two
Sure.
versions of the
Well,
movie,
it's,
but
30 years earlier, almost 40 years earlier.
but yeah, I feel like if you put this Dune movie in the context of the 80s and you glam that up and do what you're gonna do with it. I don't know. Like I have thoughts on that. But okay, so this makes more sense and what I think people would think, but it's too low for me. Dune Part 1, based on 68 critic reviews, it's a 74 out of 100.
On Metacritic?
And on Metacritic. And one out of 1,680 user reviews, it's a 7.9, a 79. So it's kind of bizarrely low. I don't know. Let me see what the rationalization here is. See what some of the it's mostly like it's mostly favorable, but it's not like there's a ton of negative reviews averaging that out. It's mixed.
Mhm.
A director comparison I hoped wouldn't hover in my mind was Zack Snyder. This is relevant in two important senses. It's kindred spirits with his 2009 Watchmen. What?
Are you sure about that?
Oh, in its utter fealty to the text.
Okay. Okay.
An
Even
impressive piece
even
of
though Watchmen's ending is notorious for being completely different from the book.
the ending, sure, but we're we don't even have the ending of the book in this in
Yeah,
Dune.
right, sure. Which is
So
honestly kind of anticlimactic, by the way.
yeah,
It's just kind of, it stops.
okay. So it's an impressive piece of mimicry, unbothered by its source's troubling ideas. The sense of subversion bubbling below. Okay, I'm sorry. You can't. You want people to okay. Um.
Okay, that guy sounds pretentious, or gal sounds pretentious. And I think that often there is pretense
Oh.
that is good. Uh, Sometimes I think people just type things out because they want to sound smart. Uh-oh, what?
I found someone that has my criticism.
Oh, hey. Well, lay it on us.
David Rooney. I agree with you.
David. Hey, David.
Paradoxically, given its lofty position in the sci-fi canon, much of the narrative's novelty has been diluted, rendered stale by decades of imitation.
Yeah. Oh, hey, can we talk about Jodorowsky's Dune for a second?
We can, but let me just finish like
Oh, okay.
restating. This is my big and only problem with this movie. So many things have tried to be like it over time that it feels like it's unoriginal. But it
It
is the
feels like an
original.
imitation, but it was the one.
Yes.
Well, that's why I wanted to mention Jodorowsky, because he made a Bible of like all this concept art and story to
Oh yeah.
adapt. And then he gave it to studios, and then nobody took it up. But what they did do was go through and be like, wow, that looks great. Let's put it in this other movie. So
Oh,
Alien
right.
has so many cues from Dune because
Uh-huh.
Giger worked on Dune, did a lot of the concept art for Jodorowsky, and Fox, I think, did Alien.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, well, that's interesting. Hey, HR, you want to come over here and do more art for us? And then I can't remember, that's the one that sticks in my mind the most, but a lot of studios cribbed all this stuff from the Bible that he made. And I call it a Bible, not in the sense of the Christian Bible, but in the sense of like a text that is like, we go back to this as the
Right.
source of truth for our movie. So yeah, that is particularly salient for Dune in particular, as far back as the 70s, I think. So people have been imitating Dune in one form or another for decades. Long,
Mhm.
long, long time. That's actually
Yeah.
not something I thought about when I watched the movie recently. That is a fair criticism.
Yeah. Yeah. Like franchises have beaten the concept of the chosen one to death. And so I don't know. So a lot of other common criticism is it's very much a part one, doesn't stand on its
Mm-hmm.
own kind of thing. And it's like, okay, debatable, but fair. And so that's Metacritic. So IMDb 5,747 user reviews
Oh,
gives it. It's not popping up on here. I have to.
it's okay. It's an 8,
Is it?
8.0.
And what's the critic reviews?
Oh, I don't know. I don't go on IMDb a lot.
8.0. Oh yeah, no. Out of 759,000 ratings?
8.0. 216,000 of those are 8.
Whoa. So
8.
decisively 8.
Yeah, let
Um
me crunch some numbers real quick.
almost 30% are an 8, another 25% are a 9, another 18-20% are a 10. And then you go down from 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. It's funny. There's all
71.81% of reviews are 8 or higher.
yeah. Yeah. So it's funny always that like you go down pretty evenly from 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 are all counting down and then one is higher. It's like some people seem to decide once they're in that territory where it'd be a 4 or lower. No, this was a 1.
Oh, just put a 1.
Like if you didn't like it, you just didn't like it at all. Like it's very weird to see that so consistently. Um and then the big one, the one who is overshadowing everything, the Rotten Tomato. Here we go. All right. Out of 509 reviews, it has an 83% of them are positive, more positive than negative.
Okay.
And okay, so out of that 83%, the average rating, the actual average, like this is what it is out of 10, is a 7.6.
Hmm.
Where the average star rating from audiences is 4.5 out of 5. It's still 90%.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to me that the audience rating is like 90% of people say it's positive. The average of those people is that it is a 90.
Well,
Yeah.
so for a movie like this, where its scope is huge,
Mm-hmm.
its subject matter is very deep, to have a 4.5 from audiences on one of the biggest review sites, this is Rotten Tomatoes, correct?
Yeah.
That's very
5,000.
impressive.
Yep.
Because so I'm of the mind that there is tremendous depth, and I feel the same way about Mass Effect. If you get the chance to play Mass Effect, there is tremendous depth if you want to pay attention to it. I
Yeah.
think Dune does a fantastic job of not forcing you to pay attention to the really deep stuff. There are a couple of things like the Bene Gesserit and the prophecy that you kind of have to pay attention to, or you'll be like, "Why do all the Fremen love Paul? Like, what's the deal?"
Yeah.
Um, because if you're not paying attention, the Bene Gesserit did that intentionally, and he just sort of stumbles into this Messiah rule,
Mm.
kind of. But you don't have to pay attention to a lot of the other stuff of like Sardaukar. They're deadly. That's all you really need to know is the bad guys hired them and they're deadly. Worst, best fighting force, worst nightmare. That's all you need to know. You don't have to know about all the background of how they work and everything. But if you want to, just pay attention and you'll learn about the bloodletting, drinking blessings they do. And it's all weird, but you don't have
Yes.
to. Uh,
Yeah. I mean, a lot of like the more successful, I guess, high concept blockbusters, like your Christopher Nolan features, for example, usually work on
mhm.
two levels where you can choose to not think about it and just be like, this is a heist. It's a weird
Yeah.
heist,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
we know that they're trying to get to a piece of information, and they get to that piece of information by going from point A to B. And maybe the weird thing I have to accept is that point A is in a dream and point B is in a deeper dream.
Mhm.
It doesn't take too much of a stretch to think like, okay, this level's all snow, this level's a hotel. Like you can
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
piece things together. But if you want to go into the existential insanity of like what it means to be in a dream versus reality and all of these other, what does each character represent to the main character and in and of themselves and all that stuff, you can, and the information is there for you to chew on.
Mhm.
um
Chew
and they
on.
don't spell everything out to you by holding on a still shot of the character while they voice over their thoughts.
Oh, does that happen
um
in another movie?
in the 1985 Dune, to mixed results. I think
Mhm.
sometimes I actually quite appreciated it, that it was holding my hand. On the other hand, don't touch me.
Isn't there like a voiceover from Virginia Madsen at the beginning, kind of
Yeah.
just like cramming the
Oh, she's straight up
information?
on screen, and
Yeah,
she's
she's just
like
like, here's
disappearing and coming
everything you
back.
need to know about
Yeah.
the world of Dune. Okay, now go enjoy the world of Dune.
Yeah. Yep.
Whatever happened to Virginia Madsen? She was really good. She was in Candyman, the Dune, and a handful of other things.
That's where I knew her from.
Yeah.
So anyways, so Dune,
Uh-huh.
uh
Big pile of sand.
bizarrely across the spectrum, like A minus, 90, and then like 7.9 critics and like 75 Metacritic and IMDb 8. So like an a weird spread of a reception here. Why is that not consistent, do you think?
So it sounds like critical, like professional criticism tends to be a little lower than audience sentiment. Is that right?
Yeah, but like I will say the thing that where there's like the most a massive an over surplus sample size on IMDb of 700,000 whatever reviews, you get smack dab in the middle,
Oh, right.
8.0
Well, you mean in the middle of the
of the range of
critical
review
responses? Yeah.
critical responses.
I was
Yeah.
like, eight's not in the middle. Does he not know 1 to 10? Uh, no. Yeah, you're right. So I it's odd to me because usually if you have a high concept movie, and maybe this is a preconceived notion on my part, I haven't looked at all of the data, but when you have a high concept movie, critical response tends to be higher and audience scores are lower because they're like, I didn't know what was going on.
Hmm.
But with this, it's not that way. And I think a lot of credit goes to the effort put into this movie because it's easy to make a huge budget movie. I got to point fingers at Marvel, for example. It's easy to make a huge budget movie and everything is just CG and you just write the checks and then you put the movie out. And I saw a video about this. I don't remember what video it was, but take, for example, Black Widow, where she blows up the thing at the end and she jumps out and the explosion is behind her, but she is well lit,
Yeah.
uh, despite a
Yeah.
huge fireball behind her. And you contrast that with, no pun intended, on multiple counts, you contrast that with um, the scene where the Sardaukar attack the Atreides on Arrakis. It's night, it's dark, and then there will be explosions, and that's the only time you can really see the people because
Hmm.
explosions, fireballs are bright and hot, by the way. Fire is very hot. If you've never been near a big fireball like that, it's unpleasant. Anyway, sorry. I won't go down the rabbit hole of talking about concussion versus fire because a lot of explosions are not fire, they're concussive forces. And that's
Hmm.
what hurts. Anyway, sorry, I said I wouldn't do it. I'll stop there. But
Okay.
I think a lot of credit goes to the effort put into this movie because not only the effects are like, that's a real explosion off in the background, and Josh Brolin is suddenly visible and then he's not really. The costumes are all like really interesting. The art design, like the set design and the concept art, is all wonderful and visually distinct from one area to another. So I think that whether, again, to quote Red Letter Media, you didn't notice, but your brain did, and it has a positive impact.
Big thing. As far as a commitment to practicality and reality and whatnot, this is year before the Batman said this might be like the first movie to do this treatment in this way. That this was filmed digitally for IMAX,
Mm.
printed on 35 millimeter film, and then scanned digitally from that 35 millimeter film print so that they would have
Hmm.
the grain and the sort of vibration and like life kind of applied over the aesthetic of the movie. And so what you're watching is a copy of a copy of a copy of an image that you saw. And
Okay. And it still looks that
it's
good?
gorgeous. Like
It sure
it's
is. So somebody very graciously gave me a copy of 4K Blu-ray of Dune for Christmas a couple of years ago, and it was phenomenal. I watched it on HBO the first time I watched it, but this time I watched it on that Blu-ray, and it was incredible. And it was loud. It was so loud, but in a good way. It wasn't just like which remind me, let me not forget to talk about accessibility in video games later.
okay.
Going back to Alan Wake 2, folks. But yeah, I didn't realize, like you said, a copy of a copy of a copy visually, and it still is beautiful.
Well,
Did
I
I?
think even more so than it may have been if you were just looking at still perfectly rendered, sort of digitally
Mm,
composed images.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I think there's something to that. There's something to tricking the back of your mind into a belief that all of this whole image was captured on something moving and mobile and whatnot. And it's
Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah.
I still think I think it's impossible for someone to make a movie digitally in the same way as you would make a movie on film. So I think there's other things in the back of our head we know. Whenever we used to look at movies that look like this on film, they couldn't put cameras in this location, or they couldn't do this, they couldn't do that. You know,
Mm.
like this would have been a miniature, but it's clearly a digital thing. Like, but I think so much of that just we become numb to it, and it becomes noise in the background. It's just if you watch, for example, the Batman, you can see really because this is the next movie that I know that did this. When the logo the Batman comes up on screen, you will see it vibrating because
Mm.
every film cell that was scanned in would be this like moving reel of images that is being projected out onto a thing, and it's so cool to think about. And it's just the insane care and attention to the quality of the image that you're looking at is I love Denis Villeneuve. Like I love like
In love with
everything he's
Villeneuve?
made. I in love with Villeneuve. Absolutely. Um oh, a shirt of that. There's got to be a shirt of that, right?
Surely that's out
Okay.
there. If not, time to make it.
Yeah. So yeah. Also
Yeah.
something I always told myself that I would point out is this is Dunk. And so obviously the whole
Dunk
movie
and
is
Idaho?
yeah,
Yeah.
the whole movie was secretly about Duncan, Idaho. That's
That's it. You know it. You know, and
so
that's one more thing, by the way, is there's a scene where Gurney Halleck, Josh Brolin, trains Paul. And
mhm.
Paul says, hey, not really in the mood. Give us a song. And I don't think they explored that a
Right.
whole lot, and they should have done more. That he's a musician, like he's a troubadour and he's a warrior. But his passions lie with music, but he also is a very capable warrior. And they don't really do that as much as they should. Like he reads a poem when they land on Arrakis, and that's like it. That's all they do.
It is so funny. You talked about this. You talked about how some movies hold your hand with information and some don't, and there's a weird line here with that. And I think you were saying something about
Yeah,
that scene where he's training with him.
yeah. So, okay, so let me talk about this scene in a second. Let me go back to one that was really good. So I wish I could remember the Atreides home planet, and I'm gonna Google it right now and then pretend I knew the whole time, um, because I know it. I just can't. Caladan. So when they're on Caladan, and Paul and his family are about to depart for Arrakis, there's a moment where there's no dialogue. There's no text on screen. There's nobody has to explain anything. It goes on long enough to be apparent, but not so long that it's self-indulgent. Where they're about to go to Dune, Arrakis, called Dune as like a nickname because it's all desert, which is not a functional biome anyway. It's like having like a whole planet of desert where you have moisture evaporators. It just doesn't make any sense. But he is like by the water and he puts his hand in the water and like turns it over and then takes it out and like looks for a second and then it's over. And it's a beautiful moment of like, you know what he's doing. Again, you may not have noticed, but your brain did. He's savoring the fact that this is the last time or the foreseeable future that he'll just be able to put his hand in water whenever he wants. Because water is a precious resource on Arrakis. And the movie doesn't say anything. Again, it only goes on long enough for it to be like a man putting his hand in water and savoring it and then leaving.
Whereas
You
in the
don't have
1985 movie, they have his dreams are laced with images of still water with a droplet of water like rippling the
oh
surface.
man.
And he's constantly thinking to himself, it never rains on this planet. It's never rained.
Come on, David, you're better than this. I will say maybe the studio forced him to put that in
I
there.
baby.
So that's beautiful. It doesn't hold your hand, as you said. And then there's a scene where they do that and then they hold your hand anyway. And I hate that. So yeah,
Yeah.
that scene where Josh Brolin comes in, he's like, it's time for combat training. And he's like, oh, give us a song. No, too bad. And he throws a knife and narrowly misses Paul. It's great. They have these shields that in the 1985 movie are like Tron. And I think it's cool
I do too.
with the benefit of hindsight and the evolution of computer generated imagery.
And now having a whole other movie
Yeah,
where it looks different, so you can just watch
yeah,
that.
yeah. It hasn't aged great. Um, but they turn on their shields, and I can go into the way shields work and why hand-to-hand combat is a thing in Dune. Suffice to say, laser guns are bad, and when shields were developed, it basically causes a nuclear explosion if you use a laser gun on one, killing you and everybody else. So they don't do that anymore. But so they turn on their shields, and there's a great moment where Paul, getting ready to practice, to spar, taps his shield like that, and it goes bunk bunk, and then he slowly lowers his sword and it goes through the shield, and you're like, oh, okay, I see how that works. If you go fast, it'll bounce off the shield, but if you go slow, it'll go through. And so that's how the combat works. And it's very like a delicate dance of like, you have to move quickly, but then you have to slow down when you go through the shield. And I was like, oh, I get it. Thank you. Less than a minute goes by, and Josh Brolin says, the slow blade penetrates the shield. It's like, God, you did such a good job, and then you ruined it. Why? I got it. I understood. And then you had to put that line in there. I would rather.
I like that line.
I mean, yeah, it's a fine line, but either show me or tell me, don't do one and then another. If you did both at the same time, I would get that. I think that'd be fine.
It's funny. The scene is almost identical in the 80s one. He walks up
Except
holding a musical
Patrick Stewart
instrument.
is Gurney Howe.
Yeah. And he's like, come on, like give us a song. We just did the fighting this morning. And he's like, "Arr," and he's like, what's going on? This guy's being really serious about this. And they pop up their shields. But the weird benefit of that line is you really can't tell what the hell is going on in between these shields because they're giant blocks. They look like
Right. Yeah.
they look
That
like
again.
the robots from Interstellar. They
You
look
wanted another Lego
insane.
movie. You got one.
Yeah, so like you can it's great that he says that because he's teaching him, so there's that added character development to it that he's like trying to have that mentor relationship, and you can't really make out what is happening. But here it's really clear. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
probably should have worked that line a little bit and thought there's something to the fact that he's telling that to someone who is stabbing him, like he is teaching and whatnot. But no, 100%, it's one of those things where it's like you get the concept, and the fact that he taps his shield and then does it slowly tells you he has been taught this concept. So it becomes incredibly redundant and a little funky to the ear to then just turn around and have him teach him, like,
Yeah. And just
you
tell
know
them. I don't know. I just
it's
it
that
left a
kind of
bad taste
thing.
in my mouth.
I was that kind of bad student where I would get like really anxious if someone told me that, be like, you said that to me already. You think I don't know that? What's going on? And I've got like a knife to this person's throat.
Yeah, I've been doing this for years, Gurney. I know.
Yeah. So yeah.
I mean, but that's the only time I really felt that way of like,
And it seems it's clearly out of, I mean, since it's so recognizably distinctly the same in both movies, I assume it has to be lifted from the book almost verbatim.
yeah, I mean, probably. It's been a while since I read the book.
Well, that's kind of the big thing I wanted to ask you about is how do you feel about this as an adaptation of the book, especially someone who
Oh
grew
yeah,
up
yeah. You mentioned fealty to
with your
the
relationship
book.
with Lord of the Rings?
Eh, so to me, Lord of the Rings is a little easier to adapt into. The depth of what Frank Herbert came up with for this book is insane. And that's why only like the most auteur directors were willing to really take a stab at it. No pun intended about the knives. A
The slow
slow
blade.
stab. Uh,
2 parts of a movie.
yeah.
Slow
So
blade.
the it's it is a lot, and I get why you had a movie in the 1980s that was kind of like some people liked it, some people didn't. I would call it a cult classic now. Um, it's David Lynch, and I have yet to see a bad David Lynch project. Season 3 of Twin Peaks notwithstanding.
It's sort of like how David Fincher hates Alien 3, but I think that there's a
Oh,
huge fan following of that movie.
that's a whole other animal because he was a freshman director,
Oh yeah,
and
no,
the
I know.
studio kept
Well,
trying to put things in.
David Lynch didn't make like Blue Velvet until after. Like, he had made oh man, he
Mm,
made like a couple of things, but
like
it
Eraserhead
is
and things like that.
yeah, he had made a couple of things, but this was very much like
That's fair.
like he turned down Return of the Jedi before making this.
Right. And that would have been such a thing
Yeah.
if he had made Return of the Jedi. Uh Jedi Knight. Sorry, I had to. Um
That was good.
Everybody's got delusions of grandeur, which is the first time I heard that as a kid, by the way.
Yeah.
I was like, Mom, what does that mean? What is he talking about? But
Right.
so this book is so rich, and that's why the book is so well loved, is because it's very rich. It's very interesting, and a lot is happening, and there's a lot of intrigue, like politically, quote unquote. There's so much going on. It's so dense. Every shot. Well, sorry, folks. Uh, it is very detailed, and so to make a movie, you have to ask yourself, what do I leave in and what do I take out? Do I make multiple movies? Do I not? So 1985 was one movie. 2000 or 2001, I forget, was a mini series, which is probably the best way to do this. It's like 5 long episodes.
Mhm.
I didn't see it, and I really should. And then they even made a sequel of the next 2 books into a mini series, I think, called Children of Dune, which is weird. Uh,
Mhm.
and then you have, I'm sure there's other adaptations like the tabletop RPGs and video games and so on, but then you have this one from 2021, I think has done the best in terms of trying to adhere to the book without, making it so inaccessible. And I think that's reflected in the critical, well, the audience response at the very least, that it resonated with people and I think Denis Villeneuve did a really good job of riding that line of being a self-indulgent, huge sci-fi opera and being something that everybody would enjoy. Is it one to one with the book? I mean, I don't agree with that guy in his
Mhm.
review that said fealty to the book. I don't think so. But I mean, it follows the book pretty closely
Mhm.
to its credit, I think, not to its detriment. So, like, there are some movies I couldn't think of any, but I'm sure there's movies out there that
Well,
one to one
that
with the book, and then it doesn't work because that's not
that
how
guy's that guy's
visual media
criticism
works.
was it's one to one with the book, and the book has problems, therefore the movie has problems, without being clear about what those problems
Oh yeah, yeah,
are.
yeah. What are the problems?
So I can't. That's the if you're gonna just do the obviously the source was problematic kind of hand wave, then I'm not going to listen to you. I,
Hmm.
so I would be very curious to know what the person's actual criticisms are. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah. So so yeah. Well, so what? So I mean, I've heard this a lot that like Dune is supposed to be notoriously difficult to adapt.
Mm.
Um, is there anything about it that you feel like it's lost in translation?
Not lost, but definitely like some of the richness of it is not present, not as present. But that's the thing
Mm.
is the movie is so high concept to begin with that it it's already got so much going on that it would be difficult to maintain an audience's attention
Yeah,
while
because
doing those things.
it's interesting because it does. High concept has, I think, a couple of different meanings, and usually the context people talk about when they're talking about movies is
Mm.
different than when they're talking about like some other media. And with movies, it is, can you string the concept of the movie into one easily identifiable blurb for a movie poster? You know, and
Okay.
so with Dune,
Yeah.
you kind of have an interplanetary, intergalactic struggle where a chosen one uh, fights for freedom and the spice must flow. You know, like
Yeah.
there's kind of a high concept element to it. It's but like
Right. I mean, it could be boiled down to uh messianic movie, chosen
yeah,
one movie. And I
but
think
I
that
do think there's a lot more to it than that.
I think it's reductive. Yeah, I think to call it that would be reductive.
Yeah. So it's just it's hard because I mean I haven't read Dune, so but I know that most of the time when I'm seeing an adaptation of a book, a lot of what gets lost for me is my ability to digest the information
Mhm.
because a movie doesn't stop. And
Right. Yeah. You can't put it. Well, I mean, you could pause it, but movies are made in such a way that pausing a movie kind of takes you out of it.
but if I was
Whereas
to
putting
pause a
down a book.
movie, yeah, if I was to pause a movie at the same plot beats of when I would pause a book,
Mhm.
I'd be like watching it frame by frame for a couple minutes and then I'd stop watching for a day. Like it yeah. So
Yeah. And I think
I don't
video
know.
games are kind of a medium point between that
Yeah.
because you can pause a video game. In most cases, a lot of video games now you can't. You're not able to pause them.
Well,
But
that's the insane thing about video games is the scale of ambition that you can have and the kind of story that you can tell
mhm.
where you get something but then like trying to deliver on the expectations that that sets in a video game format, it's like
Yeah. Well,
really
it's also
difficult.
the element of interactivity that isn't there in a movie or a book, where
Yeah.
you are an active participant in what's going on.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think this does a really good job of capturing the essence of Dune. And again, I do think it's reductive to call it a chosen one movie. There is a chosen one, and that's obvious. But it's also about the plight of the Fremen on Arrakis, and
Mhm.
there's undertones of social inequality and so on that have been there since the book was published in a long time ago, specifically 1965, 50 years ago,
Mhm.
60 years ago. Oh my God.
Mhm.
It's not the 2010s anymore.
Yeah.
So that those ideas have been around for so long. And you mentioned earlier that uh, other movies and other media have imitated this. And yeah, it's true, but not as much the social inequality aspect of it, which is a big deal. And I want to say that was top of mind for Frank Herbert when I think, because he was out in, I think he was in California looking at like beach dunes and the ecology of them and so on that started
Hmm.
this. Because I think this is all at the end of the book, by the way, that he just added all this stuff at the end. He's like, oh, by the way, like here's how I started thinking about making this book.
Oh, cool.
Oregon dunes in Oregon, which apparently is a thing in Oregon.
Okay.
I gotta visit this place. Mountains,
Yeah.
forests, and a desert. Anyway,
So, yeah. So, what do you expect from Dune Part 2?
good question. Because I do think that the movie should have stopped earlier in the story. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I know some people aren't a fan of cliffhangers, but ending the movie at the point where spoilers everybody. Okay. Uh, they kill Duke Leto Atreides, Paul's father.
Mm-hmm.
They kidnap Paul and his mother Jessica. I think that happens. Does that happen before Duncan Idaho is killed by the Sardaukar or after? It's been a while.
Same time.
Okay. So this is all
He's
roughly
killed
happening at the same time.
during that. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that is a great cliffhanger. And then you still have plenty of meat on the bone to talk about everything else after that.
In short, what I think the unusual thing about Dune is I don't think audiences have fully decided how they feel about it. I think it was a
Hmm.
little bit different, and I think that it's going to be interesting to see what the audience has taken away in the last 2.5 years since the movie came out, and see what the audience response is now that people have sort of an expectation of like the flavor of the movie. Um, Christopher Nolan said it's the Empire Strikes Back of this generation. So yeah. Well, don't we have a new one yet? Don't we have a I mean, don't we have a new Empire Strikes Back that we could just say
Well,
it's the this of this generation? Like,
I actually had said before, I think on here that Mass Effect is the Star Wars of the late
yeah.
2000s, mid 2010s. But it was a video game, so it didn't have as much broad appeal
Yeah.
as a movie does. I don't think that about this movie. Kind of because Dune is an adaptation of a book, while Empire was its own thing. You could argue that like Star Wars, the first one, A New Hope, is roughly imitating Hidden Fortress, um,
Yeah.
Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress. Meanwhile, Empire is its own animal. Like
Yeah.
it's like they took that story and then they expanded it dramatically.
So I want to know what Skittles O' Henry's doing. So we're gonna do that.
Oh, who? Skittles O'Henry. Yeah. So I mentioned Alan Wake 2. Finished it, played it over the course of just a few weeks, I think. It's really good, but flawed, as I mentioned. I think next, unless something happens and another game that I'm very interested in playing comes out, I'll probably play Persona 5, which is a um, It's complicated. Never played Persona 1 through 4, but
Mhm.
you don't really have to. And it's also a spin-off of another series called Shin Megami Tensei, which you also don't really have to play. Uh, I have no idea what's going on. I know my brother loves it, so I'm probably going to play it. And I may have said this before too, is that this is one of the few games. A lot of times I listen to video game music, it's because I had a really good time playing a game. I want to listen to the music. It reminds me of the good times I had in the game. This is the opposite. I heard the music from this game and
Mhm.
thought, I have to play this
Oh,
because
cool.
it is like a Japanese RPG. So you think kind of Final Fantasy and the and all that. And I was like, what? If nothing else, I'm gonna be bopping my head like to the music,
Yeah.
and even if the game sucks, I'm gonna be enjoying the music. But I feel like there was something else that I was like, I also need to play that, but I don't remember what it was, so I probably won't.
Baldur's Gate 3.
I don't know. I try not to be a contrarian, but this game gets such high praise, and I look at it and I'm like, I don't know. Ah,
Yeah, it is a really weird thing because it definitely met a fandom that was clamoring for something that looked like it. So you have a weird
hmm. It's
sort of
also I think
a
that's a
bit of
great
overhype.
parallel between Dune because Dune had broad appeal despite being a high concept, very long movie. Baldur's Gate is a D&D video game where you literally have to roll the dice. I mean, not literally dice, but
Right.
it is based on dice rolls and it's
Yeah.
so dialogue heavy and people love it.
Yeah.
And it's another sort of out of left field, like hugely popular video game
Yeah.
that you if you had told me, hey, at the end next year there's going to be a video game that is basically a D&D game,
Yeah.
and it's going to sweep the game
Game of the
awards,
year. It's gonna be
I
it.
was like,
Yeah.
no, don't be ridiculous.
Yeah.
But no, it did,
Well, it's
it
just
really did.
there was this weird social pop culture primer. You know, there's a D&D movie. There's a
Mm,
rising fandom across like Critical Role and other things that are kind of like upping people's interest. There's been gradually increasing references to D&D. Like, you know, there was the episode of Community, and that was already over 10 years ago. And then there's like, I don't know, just little acknowledged references to either dice rolling or that kind of thing that puts it in people's heads. And since Critical Role and all this stuff started in like 2017, then it's been gradually gaining in popularity, and 5e has been a big deal, and Dungeons and Dragons have been trying to do this new edition. Wizards of the Coast is a problem, and all this other things going on. But so it's like this big sleeper, like we know we like this property and people are kind of engaging in it, but there's no real high profile projects that sort of cater to that audience. And there was just one studio that was like, we know we like this game and we're gonna make it into a game, and they did. And this it like hit this big audience that was like, what? And I think that might have the spiked the appeal of the game for people. It just
yeah.
it hit an audience that was looking for something. It was like a shot in the dark.
Yeah,
And
and again, it is clearly well made, and there's passion behind it. Again, just like Dune, where the people making it cared about what they were
mhm,
making, and it's apparent in the final product, which
yeah.
also is appealing. But I agree with you entirely that yeah, there was an audience present, but I think that
Mhm.
that only accounts for the initial momentum, that jump start, and then they told other people, and then other people told, and suddenly it became a game
I
that
see.
everybody.
In this case, though, it's a little different because it takes so much of your time to run just one playthrough of the game, and there's so much appeal in replaying the game and refinding out things, and people who are trying to speed run it are only getting like a fraction of the experience of what the game has to offer. And like,
Speed running an RPG.
you can accidentally kill a super consequential character within like 20 minutes, and
Ah.
the credits of the game will roll.
Oh, I see. Okay, I gotcha.
Like,
So roll
yeah.
credits. Which, by the way, in speedrunning, if you out there don't know, there are different types of speedrun glitches, no glitches, 100% the game as fast as possible. But this is roll credits, where it's just if you get the credits to roll, you did it.
Yeah.
There's a speedrun of Ocarina of Time, Zelda.
Mhm.
Ocarina of Time, you can roll credits in 5 to 10 minutes because and this is fascinating to me. Don't know how it works. I don't know programming or coding, but it is very fascinating to me that every action you take in a game, uh, if it's not what's called RNG, a random number generator, which is what a lot of games have, uh, every action you take changes something in the back end of like the values of the map, your location, your items, and all of this stuff. And if you know how to manipulate those data points, you can trick the game into doing something it's not supposed to do. So basically, if you, at the very start of the game, I think it's like collect Deku nuts, walk backwards a certain amount, and then rotate, and then backflip through a doorway, those values line up in such a way that the game is like, the next thing that's supposed to happen is the credits roll. But
Oh,
technically, you didn't beat anything.
right.
You just tricked the game into rolling the credits because those values lined up to where the game is like, oh, that's what's supposed to happen now.
Okay.
So, but yeah, killing a character, that's good. I like that you can do that. That's actually there. I think Far Cry 4,
Yeah.
there's one that takes place in East Asia, and the game starts, you show up because like a parent died or a grandparent died. You go to this country and you're immediately captured by this like military regime that is trying to take over the country. And they sit you down in a room, and this guy is like, hi, I want to talk to you about such and such. And he's like the leader of this regime. And then rebels attack, and he's like, wait here. And he leaves. And so your objective is find a way out. And so you do, and then you meet up with the rebels, and then you play the rest of the game. Or you do what he asked. You wait here. And then a few minutes go by. He comes back in and he's like, hey, sorry about that. Anyway, I was really good friends with your relative. I want to show you to their graveside. Let's go. And then the ending is completely different and it happens like 45 minutes into the game.
I always appreciated this Game Boy Color game called Golden Sun
Yeah. Yeah.
because the very start of the game they say there's this big problem, there's this thing, and are you gonna be a hero that's willing to accept this? And you can say yes or no, and you say
Yeah.
no, and it's like that's it, the end.
Oh, okay. We'll go home.
And then it just reloads the game and it redoes the beginning and asks you the
Oh, I love it.
information again. Yeah, I like things like that. But that's the thing. So Baldur's Gate, the thing is that audience that initially glommed onto it kept being rewarded for months after and kept hyping up like new things that were discovered by this person there and whatnot. So I
Hmm.
think I think that audience had bigger play for a longer reach than they would have uh with most other properties. So I don't know, but so yeah, so what else? What is Skittles and Henry doing this month? What are you doing this month?
Oh yeah, not streaming. Unfortunately, just don't have time. I need to, and I know I need to make time.
No, yeah.
Which actually, hey, spoilers for Alan Wake 2. That's kind of the whole point of Alan Wake 2 is self-determinism and the
Mhm.
fact that Alan is writing a story and these things are happening as he's writing the story. But somebody eventually tells you, don't be, don't follow the story, be the story. Basically saying like do what you want to do. Like don't sit there and think you have to adhere to anything. And there's a huge culmination towards the end of the game of literally the game telling you you have to face the actions you have to face. Doing nothing doesn't help anyone. That scene was deeply uncomfortable. One, because I don't take initiative and do the things I need to do, but also because the main character feels like she's losing her mind. And I always am very uncomfortable with that in media. You know, in Labyrinth, when the trash lady tries to convince Sarah that she's been there forever and she should be another
Yeah.
trash lady like her, oh, it makes my skin crawl.
Yeah.
Like trying to convince someone of a reality that isn't there. And
Check
that's like
in.
the
But
whole
you've
last
always
chapter.
been here. What?
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry. I thought
I'm
you were
sorry. I
my
thought you were my
husband.
husband. Hag.
Beg your pardon. Okay, I can do that whole movie. I don't
Yep, me too.
know.
Yep.
Uh,
Next time, we're just going to run through the script of Hot Fuzz.
and Simon Pegg will be here. He's always been here.
The check is in the mail, Simon.
Yeah. So um okay. So then the month ahead, in movies, you have Dune Part 2, you have
Dune,
Imaginary.
is it called Dune It Again?
That shouldn't make me laugh. Come on, I can do better than that. Kung Fu Panda 4, which I'm weirdly excited about.
Yeah, I did see that trailer, and it's always been good. I had very low expectations with the first one and came away from it very pleased.
Yeah.
I haven't seen 2 or 3.
Oh, you would be pleased probably. Um, Imaginary, which is Blumhouse's. We heard that Disney or someone was working on a script about imaginary friends, so we made a horror movie about imaginary friends. But it's just
Okay.
a teddy bear. Um,
Oh yeah,
and
I saw
then
that. Yeah.
and then there's this movie, The American Society of Magical Negroes, and it looks
Oh.
so cute and heartwarming and fun. It's the guy who played the wizard in Dungeons and Dragons, ironically.
Hmm.
Um, he meets oh, what is the guy's name? Hang on. Oh, I know this guy, David Allen Greer.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and so him and a cast of others are all like talking about their job is to sort of make white people comfortable so bad things don't happen, and it gets into this trend where you find out that Justice Smith, that's the actor's name,
Okay.
is friends with a guy, and he kind of has a crush on a girl, but then his white friend assumes that he's like, oh, you think I should date her, like you're trying to support me, like you'd see he'd normally be the best friend in a romantic comedy,
Yeah.
and that guy would be like being set up to be with this woman, and he's like, no, no. And now this society that is like, no, you have to make that guy end up with that
Oh,
girl, but he wants to be with her, and like it's such a fun
I like
angle. They
that.
were
Yeah.
like, yeah,
That
um,
are you familiar with American fiction? It's not quite the same thing, but it reminds me of that, where a black writer isn't making any traction with his
wait,
writing
are you
career.
serious?
What?
You absolutely need to see American Fiction. That was like one of my favorite movies of the year last year. Have you
Oh,
not seen it
nice.
yet?
No, not yet.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
but so he decides to make a stereotypically black book
Yeah.
and position himself as a like very stereotypical black and everything, and suddenly he's making all this money, and the
Mhm.
conflict comes from, you know, do you feel good that you did what you wanted to do, but you
Well,
are, oh
that's the
yeah, well I don't,
remarkable thing about the movie is that that's not quite what it's about.
okay.
The whole thing is about his resentment at black identity is rewarded for feeding into these stereotypes.
Hmm.
And then the movie itself is about this person and who he is and how he is a son, a brother, a relationship partner, how he is all of these things and who he chooses to be. And then he makes this choice to sort of pander to this audience because he needs the money for one reason or another, and
Hmm.
he has to like live with himself, and he's not comfortable. And originally the other author that basically gave him the idea to do this, who wrote a book in sincerity that's like the one he wanted to make as a joke, he has to like confront that author, and he has to do so many, it's every performance in it is fantastic. There's a bunch of stuff that is up for award season. Like oh my gosh, you got to watch American Fiction. It's so I don't know. Good, I guess. Yeah.
I've heard a lot about it. And I do want to watch it. I really, it's Jeffrey Wright, is that right?
Yeah.
And Sterling K. Brown as his brother. Yeah, and
It's
both of
one
them
of
are
those
phenomenal.
movies that I keep stammering a lot because I'm trying to not tell you things because you can be spoiled on
Okay.
some things.
Okay. Yeah.
But not in the sense like, oh, so and so is his father kind of twist or anything like that.
Darth Vader.
But yeah, but like it's such an enjoyable ride that I would want someone watching it to go in kind of blind and take the little fun things that happen
Mhm.
as like new. But in April there is a movie that I'm very curious about coming out called Civil War. It's by Alex Garland, the guy who did Ex Machina and Annihilation, and
Mhm.
that's all I care about that he's made.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh,
Oh, I
and
loved Annihilation.
it is
I'll stop with that.
a Texas and California have seceded, and there's something going on like present day look at like what the Civil War would be.
Texas and California.
Yeah, I know, right?
Those two are very different politically.
I think that might be the point, like
As
ideological
they secede for
extremes.
different reasons.
Yeah, I think maybe.
Interesting. Okay.
But and then you have in April you also have a Guy Ritchie movie, The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare.
Hey, okay. I
Uh,
like Guy Ritchie.
Loosely connected to that, this month came out Agent Argyle.
Yeah.
And that's
With
only
the
connected.
haircut.
Yeah, because Henry Cavill's in both, and the director of Agent Argyle is the guy who made Kingsman and Kick-Ass and X-Men, Matthew Vaughn.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Used to work really closely with Guy Ritchie until branching off to make Layer Cake and starting to make his own stuff. There's a huge connection there.
Okay.
And the idea that they're both starring Henry Cavill is really neat. So another thing we could do is you could watch Agent Argyle, and we'll see how the mood strikes. But either way, we'll be back talking about something interesting. Just like
Something interesting. Is it streaming yet or
that's
no?
the new title for the podcast. I'm dedicated to changing the title of the podcast every 2 months. So next time it'll be something interesting.
Something interesting.
Yeah.
It's something interesting.